to their walled silos and only focusing on their, the customer on the other side of the wall, or sometimes themselves as the customer, that can be very typical.
Mm-hmm.
And they're only focused on their agendas, which become their strategies. And thus, you've seen the pictures where they have like, here's your organization, and there's arrows going in all directions. This is what's happening in your organization. That's an example of organizational myopia.
The Career Challenges Podcast, a collection of stories about overcoming professional hurdles and learning lessons the hard way. Thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Kyle Werkerly, Certified Ghostwriter. Welcome to the Career Challenges Podcast, Episode 4 with
John Knotts. I'm a personal and professional business consultant, and I own my own consulting firm called Crosscutter Enterprises.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you very much for coming on the show with me today. And this is our second time. The first recording we had was it wasn't bad. It just wasn't up to par what we were shooting for.
This one will be much better.
Much better, yes. We've fixed a lot of things in there. We've gone back and discovered, okay, what works, what doesn't. So let's move forward, which, that's basically what you do, right, as a coach and consultant and mentor, right?
Exactly. I sit down with organizations and basically troubleshoot what's happening with their organization. I work with a lot of small businesses, and sometimes they're on the rocks. They're struggling. They don't know why they're not making money, profit. They're making money, but it's going back out the other door when they're spending it on things, so their expenses are outweighing their revenue. But also coming in and just trying to solve problems and then help them develop strategic direction. So many times that the small businesses that I work with and startups that I work with have not sat down and really built an actionable and implementable strategic business plan. What they'll do is they'll download some template from Small Business Association or, off of Google, and they'll just fill it out and say, I now have my business plan because I know I'm supposed to do that. Mm-hmm. And it goes into a computer somewhere, gets filed away, and they never look at it again. So I really sit down with the owners of those businesses and their leadership team, if they have one, and help them understand why a plan is important. And then I help them build one that actually is something that they can use every day to continually grow their organization year over year.
True. So, but it's great to have a plan, and you've told me before, always have a plan. But I mean, life happens. So how do you suggest that small businesses and business owners handle those changes?
So it's actually interesting because I was just watching a video on this that somebody was talking about. She's a military spouse, mm-hmm. and she's moved multiple times. And every time that she moved, she had to start over. Everything in her life is basically changed. Mm-hmm. And in the military, if you've got anybody out there listening that are a military spouse or they have a spouse that they're in the military, their life is really dictated by the moves of the military member. They don't really get a say in anything. So a lot of times spouses have trouble trying to hold down any kind of a job. But when I thought about what she was saying and I was listening to, it was all about overcoming adversity and, being able to stick to it and deal with the changes and all that. This is really what a plan is all about. If she had sat down and really thought out what is going to happen, because we're in the military and we're going to move. Every 3 years, pretty much people in the military are moving. Sometimes, might stay somewhere 6 years, but you're going to move. So ignoring that fact and just staying in the now will cause you problems. If you plan for and say, you know what, we're going to move, and we're probably going to move multiple times if we stay in the military. So what am I going to do about that? How am I going to deal with that? What am I going to do today that helps me prepare for that move in, say, 3 years, 4 years from now? Because it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things when I sit down with clients and I talk about planning. Yeah, nobody has a crystal ball. Well, some people have crystal balls, but I don't know if they really work.
Yeah,
but
I would agree with that.
But what you can do is you can do what's called scenario planning, and I do this with many businesses where I take a look at what the challenges are that they're facing, and we talk about, through interviews, find out what's happening in the organization. And I put together like 3 scenarios. And this isn't like, aliens are coming down from the sky and they're going to start snatching up all your employees, although that could happen. No,
yes,
just
kidding. You do need that plan in place. Yes.
You do need that plan in place. But what it does is it looks at the potential for things that are feasible. And this is a feasible thing that could happen to this family. They're going to probably move, because if all they had to do is look around and say, well, geez, everybody else in the military is moving, we're probably going to move in 3 to 4 years. So prepare for it and think about what you can do today so that when you do move, you don't necessarily uproot everything. And it's not like a complete, like I wasted 3 years working in this job and now I got to find a whole new job. Mm-hmm. And that starts to get you thinking about, what can I do now to prepare for the future? What I've seen, and I've written about this and talked about it many times, is what strategic planning, what any kind of planning does, is it actually sets in place the options for when those things happen. I'm like, why do we do risk management? Why do we do operational safety, management? It's we put these things in place. We say, well, hey, there's a cord on the floor here, and I haven't tripped over it yet, but I might trip over it. Yeah. And if I trip over it, I'm going to fall and crack my head on that window and probably do some significant damage. Is there something I can do about that cord? I need that cord there, but is there something I can do about that cord? And maybe I get like a cord keeper, one of those little rubber things. So you put the cord in, and it's like a little speed bump on your floor, and kind of makes it a little safer. Now I'm planning for the eventuality that I'm going to trip over that stupid cord. Mm-hmm. But these things are going to happen in your career. You're going to grow in your business. So when you grow, how do you hire people? How do you maintain the level of capacity? So if you get more customers and you're the only one that's actually building or delivering your product or service, what's your capacity? And how are you going to bring on new people to be able to deliver your product and service? And how are you going to train them? And how are you going to manage them? People don't think about that. And then suddenly, you're running a cleaning business with somebody that I worked with, and he ended up getting, he's doing a really good job and everybody loves him. And 3 or 4 clients tell all of the people that they know about this guy. And suddenly he's got like 32 clients, and he's killing himself because it's just him and his wife.
Wow.
And he didn't even think about, I was like, well, what was your plan for, actually getting more business? And he's like, well, I didn't think about it. I just, I knew it was going to happen, but I never really thought about what would happen if that happened. And that's what scenario planning does for you. It helps you actually think about these things that are going to happen to you. And yeah, as you grow, as things change, business is going to hit you right in the face. As Mike Tyson has a saying. He says, everybody always has a plan until they get hit in the face. I think he said it just like that too.
True. Yeah.
But like in the military, we'd say all plans fail at first contact.
Yeah.
Because it's true. That's reality. But in the military, 7 years of my time, my 21 years in the Air Force, was spent as a war planner. And we built plans, contingency plans, that either were like long-standing plans, or we're going to go into foreign countries that we're in Cold War with, or they were, quick plans that it's like, hey, here's a warning order, and this could happen in the next year or 2 years from now, or the next 2 months. So let's put together a plan. Let's figure out how we're going to do this, because you don't want to be on your heels when it happens. And I'm not saying that you got to have plans for everything, but you want to think through and say, what's the likely things that are going to happen? And then you have some thoughts about what am I doing about it, and how am I preparing myself for that eventuality?
Yeah, it's always great to have a plan to not necessarily be ready for anything, but to have something to fall back on in case that does happen. Exactly. It's always it is kind of a comfort blanket too, knowing if this doesn't work out, I at least have that, so we don't have to worry about that. So
yep,
it's always great. I do agree with that wholeheartedly. So
we've talked a lot about publishing,
and
it's you can write the book and you can publish the book, and that really is the easy work for all of this.
It's time consuming, yeah, but it is easy when you really get into the next step. Sorry.
Yeah. And that's the marketing piece. And the marketing piece, if you have not taken the time when you come up with the idea of, I want to write this really cool book, who's your audience? How are you going to, why are you writing? What's the purpose of it? How are you going to market this? If you don't start thinking about that and planning for that at the point that you start drafting up that book, you get to the end and you publish this book, and one, you have no idea who it's supposed to go to. So you have no idea how to market it or who to market it to. And then you may have just created something that nobody wants to read.
Yeah.
And
or it's good. It is a good read, but nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of independent authors just kind of get hit in the face, and then they just kind of give up because they weren't expecting.
Mike Tyson.
Yeah. Ooh, why he hit so hard? But I'm guilty of that myself, though, which, I have to admit that despite my training as a ghost and my experience, I made that mistake. And in fact, I made it twice. I wrote out a manuscript, and I thought it was awesome, and I sent it off to agents, and one of them asked, well, who's your target audience? And I thought, anybody who's read Harry Potter. That's my target audience. And that sounded great. Yeah, that sounded great at the time, but to a seasoned lit author, that was basically me saying, I got a cool book. Why don't you put it out there? They will not take you seriously if you say that. And you don't have to be so specific. My target audience is 15 to 21-year-olds, with this income level, this kind of ethnic and socioeconomic background. No, it's we want kind of. You don't have to be that specific, but at the same time, you do need to have an idea of, okay, I'm going for middle grade, mostly boys, and those who enjoy sports. So those, even though they're still kind of vague, it gives you a direction that you're going to go with your marketing. And from there, you can start to identify, outlets where you can be sending your book, podcasts, TV shows, events. If there's an event that ties into that or that your book can relate to, then you can try and do like a sponsorship or an affiliate kind of thing, and go to those event planners and say, hey, I have this book that I think would relate well to your event that's going on here. Can I have like a booth or something, and do it like that. And then because once you have that goal and your literary agent knows that, or your book publicist or your book marketing person that you go to, it makes it so much easier. Now, it's not going to be, a night and day change from hard to super simple, but you've basically flattened out that path in front of you for your marketing when you know who you're writing it for and kind of where it needs to go in the market and how your marketing needs to be tailored for that target audience. So you got me off on a tangent there, John. You got me off a tangent.
No, I mean, but this is what planning is all about. And the same thing in business. You're developing a product or service. Have you taken the time to think about who your audience is? How are you going to approach them? How are you going to market to them? It's just like a book. I mean, it's, you still, once you create what it is that you're doing, you got to figure out, how am I going to get it marketed out there?
Yeah.
So it's, there's a person that opened up, kind of right around the corner from us, opened up a coffee shop on Blanco Road.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in the middle of nowhere. And it used to be a bar, and they made really good hamburgers. It's just the guy who ran the bar had the personality of a doorknob.
Wow.
and I know that's the reason why the place suffered, because you go in there and be like, hey, these are pretty good hamburgers. And you go, yeah, I get that a lot. Like, what? You're like, all right, Frankenstein.
There you go.
But this person opened up a coffee shop, and I'm like, who are you marketing to? Now, when she, and I think it's a she, my wife's been in there to check it out to see what's going on. But I think what she figured out was that I need to have a drive-through, because everybody's going to work. They're driving by.
Especially out there in Blanco. And for those who are not familiar with the area, both John and I are in the San Antonio area.
Yeah.
John, you're north in Bulverde, which is super beautiful. But a lot of people who live out there in Bulverde have to commute to San Antonio.
Yes.
And that can be anywhere from half an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how bad 281 is. And they're still working on it. They'll always be working on it anyway. And so,
it's out here in what they call the hill country. So
yeah, the hill country, a beautiful country. And I worked out there for a year too. And I loved it. I thought it was great vistas and everything. But when you have to get to work, you don't want to stop and take your time to drink coffee. And as great as the ambiance is of a coffee shop, you're weighing your time here. Do I sit in traffic longer to sit in a coffee shop and have my coffee, or do I do the drive-through and try and beat that traffic? So
exactly. So it's one of those things that I just, I think that sometimes people, they start businesses, they have a really good idea, they're really good at what they do, and this is true for like any company out there. They're generally really good at the thing they do.
Mm-hmm.
What they're not good at is the business-related activities that surround running a business. So marketing, sales, going out and doing planning, process improvement, education and training, human resources, payroll, accounts payable. Those are the things that people are like, well, I know how to make this thing or deliver this service.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really good at those things. And when you start to get really, it's one thing to be a one deep or a two deep job, mom and pa, and you're keeping everything in an Excel spreadsheet and you're tracking it. But that's going to break if you start getting really busy. If you're getting, 30, 40 sales a day, now you're going to go in, oh, when was that sale? And because everything's stubby pencil.
Mm-hmm.
And people just don't think about that. And that's what I do, is I help them think about the things that will hit them in the middle of the night. And it's not like you just do it one time. And that's the important part about planning, is that planning isn't something that you create and you throw on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Create a plan is actually built so that you can implement stuff. You look at what's going on and you look at where you're trying to go as a company, aka the vision. And this is what I want to look like in 20, 30 years from now, depending on your age and how long you think you're going to be running this company. This is what I really want it to look like. I might have, it's an empire and I've got 500 employees and I'm in these locations. Okay. You paint that picture and you tell me what it's like. And then we look at where you are today and they say, okay, what do you have to do to get there? What are the things that you have to get in place? There was a video out there. I want to say, I forgot who they called out, but basically this approach where you take and you build your org structure and you fill it, you create all the boxes that you need to be able to create your visionary organization. This is what it looks like. And then you put your name in every single box. And then what you do is you work to get your name out of each one of those boxes. So if your name is on, as far as the CFO and you're in charge of the CO, you're the COO and you're the CIO for the organization, you're like, well, I can't really do all those things very well. So I might want to find people that I can bring in to eventually fill that role. And that's, it was like a really good approach. I was like, that's a smart idea. But, thinking about what do I need? What do I need to be able to get to my vision, and then laying out step-by-step plans to make that happen. And it doesn't mean that so I had a 20-year plan when I was in the Air Force. In 2000, I built a plan and I said, this is where I want to be in the future. One of the things is I knew I needed education, but I only had one associate's degree, or I was really close to one at the time. And I was like, I need to get a PhD. And I was like, well, you don't just jump from associate's degree to PhD. What are the steps to get there? I got to get a bachelor's, and then I got to get a master's, and then I can go for a PhD. So I don't even got to worry about what the PhD is in yet. I'm going to worry about my bachelor's degree and what do I want that in that works with this. And okay, we're almost done with that bachelor's. What's that master's going to look like? And then, as I'm working on the master's, which is a shorter program, okay, what's the PhD going to look like? And where am I now going to go to school? Because I started my PhD work in 2015. And that was back in 2000 when I built the plan. There's no way that I would even if I had picked a school and said, I'm going to go to that school and I'm going to get this degree, it might not have been there by the time I got that far.
Sure, yeah.
Because the world changes. So, but that's why planning is important. And it's important so that you have something to prepare yourself for changes that are coming, but it's also so that you have a roadmap to continue to move forward, and then you adjust. And every quarter, you're kind of adjusting what you're implementing, and every year you're looking at your big plan and saying, "How am I doing?" Measuring your progress towards your goals, and hopefully getting to that vision that you set out.
Definitely. So with your clients and customers, or clients, I should say. Sorry, let me edit that out. So with your clients, John,
clients and customers, that works.
Okay. Well, some people, customer just, to me, sounds like that one time, I give you money, you give me this, that's it. And
sometimes I have that because I do a Facebook marketing training, and I'll go in and I'll teach them the training. And although I will stick with them for a little while and I'll watch them do things on Facebook and, give them little pointers and stuff about hey, remember this or try that. How did this work for you? The training's done, it's delivered. So there's not any kind of a follow-up that says, okay, and here's the next step. It's just it's done. So I have customers, I have a product that I do.
Well, whereas as a ghostwriter, I feel it's more clients. Yes, it is a one-time thing that I'm doing for them usually, but it's still, I'm getting really involved in their thought process, the way they do their job, how they want to talk, or how they want their book to look, and all of that. So it's not just you give me money and I give you what you ask me for, like ordering a pizza. It's you want a book, and you want it to look like this, you want it to sound like this, you want it to be done in X amount of time. I'm going to come in and fill the gaps in that plan. So that way we have a solid structure, a solid bridge to take you from here to there. So long question short, John. When you're working with your clients, specifically your consulting and your coaching clients, how long is that the plan on average?
So if I come in with somebody who's just a one deep startup, those kind of things. The planning that we do takes me about 10 hours worth of work. It takes more than 10 hours to deliver it, but it takes about 10 hours worth of work. Working with the client and understanding what's going on and where they have work. And that doesn't take very much to get there, because I've worked with a lot of different clients. I know a lot of the questions to ask to find out where they are with things. And then it's just a matter of sitting down with them and saying, okay, let's validate your purpose of this organization, and why do you exist? That will get refined over time, but like, really, why do you exist?
Mm-hmm.
Not what do you do? I don't care about that, because the why is more important.
Mm-hmm.
Then focus on, okay, where is it that you want this organization to go? And that's where, we have that conversation in the future. If we could propel ourselves in a time machine to the future and see this company, what does it look like? And I'll ask questions about, as far as size and employees and where you're located, because generally it's somebody, they're located in a small area. And then what we do is we sit down and we just close the gap with a simple question of what we need is. And it's how do we overcome the challenges that we're faced with today to get to that vision of tomorrow? Mm-hmm. And usually it's ideas that are just written down, and we affinitize those, we group those into like groups, and those become your objectives, and those objective groups can then be grouped again, and those become your big goals. And this is what I want to do. And you might have 100, 200 of these ideas. Usually do them on 3x5 cards, one idea per card, and you have all this stuff. So now what we do is we translate that into a plan, and we say, what's the most important thing that we need to work on now? Where's the priority? And recognize, this is the biggest thing I've recognized over doing this for 30 years, is that businesses want to do it all. And you have to be like, no, let's start with one or two of these items and let's work on them, because you're going to kill yourself if you try to do all this, because that's strategic stuff. That's transformation. That's change. You still have to do your day job. Mm-hmm. And then
sadly,
my relationship with them then becomes, now I'm just here as a coach and potentially a consultant if they lack the capacity or the capability to do something that's on their plan. And I have that capability or capacity, and they want me to do it. Mm-hmm. So normally I'm sitting down every quarter. We spend a couple of hours to say, okay, what are we going to do over the next 3 months? And then every month we're meeting for an hour, maybe a half an hour, as we get better and better into this thing. You're like, I got it. I'm good. We'll just get together at the quarter. And all right, that's fine. And then at the end of a year, then we sit down and we take a look at, all right, here's the assessment. Has anything changed? Where have we moved ourselves to? How close are we? Has the purpose and mission of the organization changed, evolved? Has the vision changed? And a lot of things can create that. I mean, I had this big vision for myself mm-hmm. and where I wanted to be in 20 years. And 3 years ago, my wife and I decided to buy a horse farm. And that was, we bought the farm, literally. But that set me back on everything. I was heavily involved in my PhD, 40 hours a week, full time, on top of full-time employment. And I was like, I can't do the PhD work. So I took a hiatus, and, at some point I'm going to get back to it. I'm going to finish that PhD because it's a goal that I want to get done. But the farm kind of took precedent over it. And trust me, it was nowhere in my plan. I wasn't like, oh, well, what if? But, we quickly sat down and we said, okay, what has to change in my plan, in your plan, to make this happen? And we laid out a plan, and, we have business plans for everything that we do. And, we have, not only do we have the horse farm, which is for profit, We do boarding, and we do training for both English and Western writing, a lot of special events and stuff. But we also have 2 nonprofits, and every one of those has a business plan with things that we are specifically doing slowly over time, because we've got multiple things going on, can't do too much, to improve things. And we've been really successful. Our farm is near capacity almost all the time, and we're constant. Every time somebody comes out here, they're like, wow, look at this, it's changed, because we're constantly making things better. And we've got, like what I refer to as the operational plan for the year that says, these are the major things I want to work on. And then every month, what are we going to do? And we meet, the whole leadership team meets, because now we have 12 employees, and I've got 6 people on the leadership team that represent the operating model for the farm. So, but yeah, it's an ongoing thing. I will keep working with a client for however long that they need me. And like I said, sometimes they say, they might say, well, you know what, I can't do this. Can you do it? Or can you find somebody who can do it?
Yeah.
So like typically it's stuff like human resources. When you start hiring people and you don't have human resources, I don't specifically do those kind of things. But if you need help with hiring and payroll and stuff like that, I have contacts in organizations that I work with, I'm partnered with, to be able to say, here you go. And it's scary for people, because they're like, I don't want to hire anybody because I don't know how to manage them. That's where I come in. I can help you with the leadership and the management. We talk through that. I can guide you and develop you to be a good leader for your organization, and talk about the problems that you're having, because you will. Everybody has problems with their people.
Definitely. And do you have an example that you're willing to share of that transformation of a client from before to after?
So one of the recent clients that I've been working with for the last 2 years has been the Bulverde Spring Branch Chamber of Commerce, and love working with them. I love working with nonprofits. I started with them while I was still working with the United Services Automobile Association, USAA, and so it was kind of part-time, and they needed some strategic planning assistance. And I came in, and we sat down, and what was going on is they had 10 years ago at that time built a strategic plan to separate out the economic development committee to create this 501c3 for Bulverde Spring Branch area of an economic development foundation. And then the chamber was going to, continue to run everything else. Well, the foundation used that plan and went forward with it, but the chamber basically was like, okay, we got a plan, and that's all they did with it. So fast forward 10 years later, and they decide that, we're going to take our business education activities, which are only focused on members of the chamber, and to really get out there and really help the Bulverde Spring Branch area grow, is what the purpose of the chamber, right? We are going to create a 501c3, and we're going to create an education development foundation, an education foundation. And this way we can help everybody in the community, so anybody can come and get education. Now, members of the chamber might get a discount or something like that, but it's open to everybody, and it stands by itself. It's got its own board and all that. And with that, because it's a 501c3, it can get donations and potentially, a facility and all that kind of stuff. And it helps out everything. Well, they needed a strategic plan for that, and they needed 2, one for the foundation and one for the chamber. And so we're going through it, and we're doing the operational assessment or organizational assessment to try to figure out where they're currently at. And this is an organization that's been around for several years. So, this is not your mom and pop company. This is a much bigger operation with a lot of activity. As we were going through things, we discovered that over the years, their membership was slowly declining. But over the same amount of years, the available members the new businesses that were coming in to the Bulverde Spring Branch area were growing. And yeah, so, and they didn't know this. I mean, they hadn't been really looking at that. I mean, they knew that they were, their membership's going down, or they weren't measuring it. They weren't managing to it. They just knew it was kind of happening. And they knew that there was growth, obviously, because they're constantly going out to these new businesses and talking to them and trying to get them to join. But we sat down and we looked at that, and I took that to the board when we did our strategic planning effort, and they laid out very specific activities to educate membership on the value. That was the other thing that we found out about a chamber, is that organizations that join a chamber versus organizations that join a chamber and get involved with that chamber, there's a big difference between who's successful and not. And basically, if you get involved with the chamber and you go to the mixers and the icebreakers and the lunches and stuff like that, you participate. Obviously, you're getting your name out there and people are meeting you and you're building relationships. And these businesses never go out of business. It doesn't mean that they're not operating at peak efficiency and effectiveness, but they don't go out of business. Whereas ones that don't ever get involved, they don't all go out of business, but some of them do. And that was one of the things that we're like, wow, look at this. If you not only join, but you're active, this is the result. And then we also looked at all of the things that the chamber offers, and we did a survey, and we asked members about, like, what do you know about what you get? And most didn't. So they started doing really active things about educating, and then they created some additional events that basically the members were asking for at different times. And in 1 year, they doubled their membership.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just amazing. Now, it's a nonprofit organization, and all nonprofits have a lot of turnover because you don't hold a position very long. It's volunteer, and you can get kind of burnt out if you do it too long.
Yeah.
So, now it's talking to the chairman, who is new, by the way. He's been there. He just stepped up to this new position. I'm like, okay, we need to revisit the plan, and it's been a year.
Yep.
We need to make this thing happen again. But that's the power of a plan. And if you're measuring the right things, which a lot of times people don't measure stuff either when they start out, they don't sit down and collect any kind of a data that tells them how well they're doing on core things. And that's a core thing. Membership is a core thing for them. It's how they make their money. It's how they get their word out. It's how they exist.
Definitely. Yep. That's what's great about those chambers. They pull all that together, kind of in theory, the nucleus of the economic, the area's economic structure. But we can get into the higher theory of economics later.
Well, they bring together a lot of stuff. They bring together education. They provide an opportunity for networking and advertisement. They obviously, from a economic perspective, they supported the economics. That's why they had an economic development committee, which became a foundation, and then they worked with them. But they also work with the legal and the government entities as well, and try to help businesses at least understand what laws are changing that are going to impact their business. And they try to bring in the right people to speak to the businesses about stuff that's happening. Out in Bulverde Spring Branch, north of San Antonio, the main highway that runs up through there is Highway 281, and that is under massive construction right now. Yeah. And when that construction's done in 5 years, there's going to be this huge growth in this area. And we took a look at it as part of the plan and said, okay, what do we have to do to get ourselves in position to be ready for that? So that's, hey, it's going to happen. Don't stick your head in the sand and ignore it. Don't think that, they might just move the whole highway around us. No, it's going through.
No, it's good.
So,
Definitely go through it. Like the post office. I remember
yeah,
the post office was sitting right there, and so that's where the big bottleneck was, and those four
yeah,
lanes went back down to two, and then afterward they expanded again. But I think it's because nobody had told the post office that they were going to that this huge civic project was literally going to go right through the middle of their building, and so of course it caused problems.
yeah.
Caused problems.
No, in government, because I've worked with government, military, nonprofits, and for profits. I support all different types of companies. Government often, they should be more aware of things that are going on, and sometimes they're just like, well, we don't want any change.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing that up here. There's certain entities that are like, I don't want anything to change. Bernie's been like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain people there that don't want it to change, and everything's got to look a specific way. Like, this is going to happen. It eventually will, and it may not happen for a little while, but in all things, change occurs. And if it doesn't, and this is probably a key thing for business, if your business isn't changing, then you're failing, you're dying.
Yeah.
And because you have lost inertia, and that's not a good thing for a business. So you want to constantly be out there, and you want to constantly be increasing operations and activity and expanding. And if that's not happening, then some people look at it and like, what's wrong?
Yeah. And they got to reassess their plan, obviously. So if the plan isn't working, then you need to come up with a new plan.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So even though your plan, your 20-year plan got derailed by a horse farm. Definitely.
And it got adjusted.
Okay.
Because I wouldn't say derailed, because the plan's still there, and I monitor the plan, I check in on it, and all right, what's next? I mean, there's two major things that I have not done. One of them is the PhD.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I've done 3 years of my PhD work, and the other one is I want to become a distinguished Toastmaster with Toastmasters.
Yeah.
Those are two achievements that I'm working towards.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last 3 years, I probably would have had those things done if this hadn't occurred. But I still have 3.5 years before my 20-year plan is up. So I was ahead. And the last thing that just happened, I'm super excited about, was publishing my first business book.
Yes.
Because that was one of the things that I knew that in my plan, I needed to be a published author.
Mm-hmm.
And in my plan, it's not just to be a published author with one book, because I have like 16 that I'm working on. And they're kind of all related to this one initial book that came out. But I just published my first book about a month ago. And it's already on Amazon. It's on Amazon, and it already has 2 5-star reviews, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And
it's a great read. I speak from experience, because you sent me an advanced copy, and it was fun to read. I really enjoyed it.
Was it easy to read?
Yes, it was.
Okay, because everybody's told me it's very easy to read, and I like that.
Yeah, and the using your stories and your examples, because you don't use real companies, right? You haven't used real companies.
No.
Yeah, you've created these fictional companies, and you've given them real world problems, and you walk them through solving that problem, and that's great, because there's some books I've read, nonfiction of course, where they're talking specifically about an entity, and so they're like, well, in this example we talk about this, but it really just limits them to that one example, which isn't bad.
No, that's true.
But when you have your ABC company, you can give them all sorts of problems, and you explain how you fix all those problems. So it's great for ABC company too.
So the book's title is Overcoming Organizational Myopia, Breaking Through Siloed Organizations. Silos in organizations today. It's like, I think this is like the number one problem in business. Mm-hmm. Everywhere I go, people are, the silos are killing us. And so the organization that I created for the book is called myopia.org.
Mhm.
And it's an organization that basically is suffering from all of the silo related issues that an organization will suffer from. And it's based off of 30 years experience working with many different organizations. And I'm like, yeah, that's what's going on. Oh, that's what's going on. But the idea of the book, and this is like the earth shattering thing, is that everywhere I go, leaders are telling me I need to break down or tear down the silos,
Mhm.
because they see the silo as a negative thing, because everybody's like, oh, it's a silo, it's hardened structure and nobody can get in. The thing is that silos are built on purpose. You create functional separation and departmental separation in an organization for a reason. So you wouldn't go in and say, you know what, we're going to do away with the human resource department because we don't need that anymore. Well, yeah, you still need that silo.
Mhm.
So, but what they think is, well, we're going to just tear this down. We're going to move the deck chairs on the Titanic and everything's going to be okay. Like we didn't run into that iceberg. So my book is focused on this thing that's actually happening in your business that is caused by silos when they start to go bad.
Mhm.
And that's called myopia, short-sightedness.
Yeah.
And organizational myopia is where an organization stops focusing on the end customer, stops focusing on the organizational strategy, and starts turning inward to their walled silos and only focusing on their, the customer on the other side of the wall, or sometimes themselves as the customer, that can be very typical.
Mhm.
And they're only focused on their agendas, which become their strategies. And thus you've seen the pictures where they have like, here's your organization and there's arrows going in all directions. This is what's happening in your organization. That's an example of organizational myopia. And the book is designed to walk you through the 9 things that are happening in your organization, the root causes, and talk about solving those. So it's almost like a surgeon taking a scalpel and doing x-rays and saying, all right, this is where I'm going to cut. And I don't need to rip apart the body. I just need to take out this little piece. Because the interesting part of the whole concept is that we as humans need to belong. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
We need to belong to something.
Mhm.
We need to form into groups. It's the love and belonging layer of Maslow's third layer up in his pyramid.
Mhm.
We are not successful in business if we do not belong. So you tear down the silo, the humans will just rebuild it.
Mhm.
And they're going to build those walls stronger because they're not going to let you tear that down again. They think that they're going to win in the big battle. They won't, but it's a never-ending struggle. And I see big companies that are constantly reorganizing because they're chasing like, oh, maybe this one will solve the problem. Maybe this. Stop reorganizing and focus on what's happening in the organization.
Mhm.
But that's, the problem. The problem is that we're going about it the wrong way, and we're fighting human nature to survive. And if they just take a look at the root causes, then they could solve a lot of their problems.
Mhm. Definitely, because it's not really the silos that's the problem. It's the way the silos are affecting the company or how they're being. I don't want to say used because they're there. It's not something you use. It's just how they're being handled, I guess should say.
Yep. And honestly, it really boils down to people.
Yes.
Because it's not the organization. The organizational structure is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Organizations, and this is one of the 9 sections in the book, is about basically creating doing organizational design on purpose and not to solve a problem. You're not organized appropriately to service your customers or to serve your, deliver your product. That's a problem. And there's a lot of times where, because we reorganize to solve problems, we move people around because they're the problem. And instead, we should be organized to deliver. It's called form meets function.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're organized to deliver, then you put the right people in the place. This is like a Jim Collins good to great thing. Get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to reorganize at times because we're not organized properly to deliver. But I will say that you shouldn't reorganize to solve the problem. You should look at governance, some type of way to create groups that span the organization, and everybody who's in that group knows that they're supposed to take their hat off when they walk in that represents their silo and put on their organizational hat and say, I'm here for the bigger strategy. And which means that, and strategic strategy is like the second most important thing to solve in an organization that's dealing with myopia. Number one is leaders. Leaders who do not understand, that are not getting developed, do not know how to identify when this stuff is going on, they're going to cause problems. So it's not that leaders are bad. Leaders don't know. So like the number one thing for all leaders out there, we talked about like who's the audience, executive leadership, anybody that's, in charge of an organization or, part of that large leadership team. They should be reading this, and their entire team should be reading it, so that they're all working together to solve the problems.
So if they can't work directly with you, John, they can at least get the book and learn from your knowledge that you've put in the book. Yes,
and I'm working on a workbook that will give you can take an assessment and specifically outline. This is, it asks questions that are related to all of the 9 areas in the book. And it's a rather large assessment, but it will tell you this is what you need to work on. And then the workbook will actually have exercises and activities that you put in place, and it'll tell you, do this first before you do that. So from prioritization, what should you work on? So I'm working on that now to come out. I talk about it in the book in the back, but it will be available this year.
Awesome. So, first, where can they get in touch with you? And then second, where can they find your book?
So I'm available on social media as John Knotts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and mainly, LinkedIn a lot because of the business connection. My website for my business, which is Crosscutter Enterprises, is www.crossctr.com. So Crosscutter abbreviated. And also they can find me regarding any books that are coming out at johnknotts-author.com. And as far as ordering the book, if they go to that author page or contact me through social media, not only can I point them in the right direction, but they can also order in bulk for a reduced rate. But the book is available on Amazon in paperback, and in about a month, it will come out in ebook format, and I'm working on the audiobook.
Awesome. Yeah, love audiobooks.
Yeah.
That's my main source of reading right now. So, all right. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I may have to have you back here in the near future. There's a lot of good stuff here that we talked about, and I want to talk more about. So,
all right. Well, Kyle, I really appreciate it. I always love talking to you. You get me started on all kinds of ideas. I got a great book idea we've talked about before we even started this show. So, and I've got 16 total books and ideas in the hopper. So, I've got a plan for my books.
Definitely, yes.
Every writer should have a plan. That's
definitely
important.
At least a plan. They don't have to follow it to the letter, but a plan doesn't hurt.
Yep.
Yep. All right.
All right.
Thank you, John.
Well, thank you. You have a wonderful night.
You too. Would you like to be a guest on the Career Challenges podcast? Visit thecareerchallengespodcast.com to find out how you can share your story. Eager to share your story with a wider audience and enhance your brand? Visit weckerlywriter.com. That's WECKERLYWRITER.com to discover how you can begin your author journey. What are you waiting for?